was bad. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're bad at high-fiving.
We miss it every time. All right. Welcome back to episode 2, Paige and Micah in the PM, where we talk all things football. I'm Paige Hunter.
And I'm Micah Farmer.
And after a quick bye week, we are back in action and ready to break down Week 7 of college football and Week 6 of NFL. Starting off with a quick weekend recap, our notable games include Stanford at Colorado, Oregon at Washington, and USC at Notre Dame. Friday Night Lights was a little late as Stanford and Colorado kept us up all night in this thrilling double overtime game. The Cardinals stunned the Buffs with a game-winning field goal after being down 29-0 at the half.
Yeah, just an absolutely crazy game. You see Colorado go up, and everyone expected them to absolutely clobber Stanford. And so you're watching this, and you're thinking, okay, that's what's going to happen. At halftime, I can go to bed, and I'm going to sleep well. And then you start watching the third quarter, and you're like, never mind, and Stanford comes all the way back and is able to win this in double overtime. Just the inability of Colorado to finish in this one, I think, is what bit them. Their defense especially really started to suffer, and Stanford passing game was really able to take advantage of it in the second half.
Exactly, and a lot going around about the Buffs right now with their previous loss, and just, really thought they had it. Unfortunately, they didn't. But let's talk about these quarterbacks real quick. Shooter Sanders putting up 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, but those are pretty good stats. And same with Ashton Daniels, about the same, 396 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, really great offensive powers, but at the end of the night, it all came down to kicking.
Yeah, at the beginning, you really saw Stanford start with the 2 QB system, but once they settled in with Daniels, the offense settled in, so I think that was definitely the right decision for him.
I agree. And the question now is, has primetime ended?
I think next year and the year after is when primetime might even start. I think it was a bit overhyped from the beginning, and so I think you're going to see that start in the next couple years.
More from the Pac-12, the game of the week took place in Seattle as the number 7 Huskies hosted the number 8 Oregon Ducks in a game that kept us all on our toes. In a back-and-forth game, the Huskies came out on top after a missed game-tying field goal by Oregon.
This, I said all week, might be game of the year, and it might have delivered on that. I don't know, we'll have to see later in the year, but both of these quarterbacks, Heisman contenders Michael Penix and Bo Nix, were amazing. The Oregon running game led by Troy Franklin he had a great game for the receiving core, but Bucky Irving led the way for the Ducks on the ground, and Troy Franklin put in a great game as receiver 1, not out of the backfield, but between them and then the Washington offense of Rome Odunze. Unfortunately, Jalen McMillan out injured, but Jalen Polk as well with Michael Penix. Those 2 dynamic offenses were so fun to watch.
Very much. Oregon had a higher offensive overall than Washington, who's ranked number 1 in total offense right now. I just thought that was crazy for the outcome of the game, but I think this game really sold Heisman for Penix. I mean, obviously we'll have to wait a few more months to figure that out.
Nix might be able to get him back in a couple months, though, in the Pac-12 title game.
That is true. So definitely, we kind of talked about last episode. Pac-12 is, not going to be the Pac-12 for very much longer, but they're going out with a bang. They're really showing that they have what it takes to be in the college football playoffs, finally.
Yeah.
Over in the Midwest, a primetime game in South Bend and an upset as the Fighting Irish redeemed their Week 6 loss and coasted to a win against number 10 UNC. Caleb Williams threw 3 interceptions as the Notre Dame defense was the spotlight of the night.
As you said, the spotlight of the night goes to that Notre Dame defense, forcing 5 turnovers in that game. And anytime you do that, you're on a fast track to win a football game. Caleb Williams played very sloppy. I think he tried to do too much a lot of the time, and that came back to bite him. So I think you watch this game and you see Notre Dame, despite a couple of rough losses in the season, is still a very good team. Yeah,
that Notre Dame defense is ranked 14th overall in total defense, whereas USC offense is 9th overall. So 2 very good offensive and defensive teams going at it head-to-head. But, I mean, just at the end of the night, it was Caleb Williams' performance that really detrimental factor for the Trojans.
Yeah, just, again, the Trojans, you wonder what could have been for them this season if they had had a little bit better of a defense. And honestly, that environment in South Bend, I think, rattled Williams a little bit. So
very much.
You wonder if that game's in USC, does it go the same way? But game was in Notre Dame, so that won't matter.
That is true. We talked a lot last week, too, about Caleb Williams and his Heisman repeat. I think that is definitely out of the question now. But, again, we'll never know. Or we will know. We'll just have to wait. We'll have to wait a couple of months. And now it's time for the Conference Center, a deeper look at the Power 5 in college football. Starting off on the Atlantic coast, we had Syracuse at Florida State. And Florida State came out of that with a 41-30 win.
Yeah, Florida State looked very good in that game. Also, maybe catch of the year from Keon Coleman in that game, absolutely mossing a Syracuse defender. And that was really the most notable thing from this game, as other than that, Florida State cruised to a pretty easy win. Then you also had Miami traveling to Chapel Hill to take on the Tar Heels of North Carolina. And North Carolina won this game 31-41. Very good win. Drake May still looking like a very good quarterback. And I think Drake May, this might be a bit of a hot take, but I think he might be drafted before Caleb Williams once April rolls around in the NFL draft. And I think because of a talent like that, North Carolina might even go on to win this conference over Florida State because they don't play each other in the regular season. So a great matchup, I think, we're due for in Charlotte in a couple months.
That's a pretty hot take, but I mean, that really could, shake things up in the playoff and kind of seeing how things end up playing out. Over in the SEC, a pretty average weekend, I would say. We saw a lot of SEC action, a lot of close games that probably shouldn't have been as close as they were. We had Georgia at Vanderbilt, 37-20.
Yeah, you look at this one, and the main storyline from this is the Brock Bowers injury. He's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, and that includes the Florida game and the Missouri game for Georgia, which is a very bad thing for the Bulldogs. You don't want to be missing your best offensive weapon for 2 of the more difficult games on your schedule. I know Florida hasn't looked amazing, but they're somehow third in the East right now.
They can.
So anything can happen in that game.
Yeah,
and then the Missouri offense, I would be worried about that game if I was Georgia. So hoping for Bowers to come back healthy. Obviously, you never want to see a guy that talented get hurt, but we'll have to see how Georgia can overcome this.
We also had Arkansas at Alabama, 21-24. We've talked a lot about Alabama's team performance this year and how it hasn't really stacked up to its full potential and just how it's been kind of a letdown overall. But give me your take on this game.
I think you have to give credit to Arkansas on this one. I think Arkansas is a better team than most people give them credit for. One possession game with Ole Miss that they lost. One possession game with LSU in Death Valley that they lost. And now this one possession game losing to Alabama. This Arkansas is a very gritty team, very physical team, like how Sam Pittman likes it, the coach of the Razorbacks. And I think Alabama came in a little bit complacent into this game, maybe looking forward a little bit. And you can't do that in the SEC, no matter who you're playing, unless it's Vandy. But
it's true.
So I think you really saw Alabama maybe relax into this a bit too much. And just like usual for this Alabama team this year, keeping games that shouldn't be close very close.
Another close one, Texas A&M at Tennessee. The score was 13-20 with Tennessee coming out with a win for that one. Tennessee has a big weekend coming up with having Alabama at home. So how do you think their performance against A&M is going to compare to Alabama?
This Tennessee-Alabama game might be one of the most competitive, but one of the worst games of the year, honestly, with these two offenses that are either hot or cold, and right now they both look cold, and so that game might be a bit of a dumpster fire. Another game that was kind of a dumpster fire, but more in the offensive sense, was the Florida-South Carolina game this week in Columbia. Both offenses dueling back and forth. Graham Mertz actually looked really good in that game. Both defenses looked awful in that game, and Ricky Pierce on that one was able to carry the Gators to a win with a late touchdown to put them ahead.
Yeah. Another big game from the SEC, or should have been a big game, but it did end up being a big game, was Missouri upsetting Kentucky, 38-21.
I don't want to hear shouldn't have been a good game from this. Missouri is good, gosh dang it. They just lost to LSU. That was a game they could have won quite easily. I love this Missouri offense. Brady Cook is great. Luther Burden is amazing. And I think this Missouri team is going to upset Georgia later this season. I've been saying that for a couple weeks now. So watch out for Missouri. Give Missouri their credit.
The fact that that game was an upset is just so funny. Being here at Auburn, come on. Over in the Big 12, nothing too big happened. We've only got one big game, and that was Kansas at Oklahoma State, which they're upset. Oklahoma State winning 39-32.
Yeah, the injury for Kansas to quarterback Jalen Daniels has completely derailed their season. They got absolutely shellacked by Texas when they played them, and now losing to Oklahoma State, a team that is not exactly amazing. So I think for a team that had pretty high expectations coming into the season, I think Kansas's season might kind of be over at this point because of that injury.
Yes. Up over at the Big Ten, there were a lot of Big Ten blowouts this weekend. Oh my goodness, talking about first Ohio State at Purdue, 41-7. I mean, talk about offense. Cal McCord going for 276 yards, 3 touchdowns. The team total had 334 receiving yards. I mean, Ohio State, we've talked about, also their performance and how it's kind of been a little bit lackluster, but this was a show-out weekend for them.
Yeah, this is something they needed after coming out flat versus Maryland last week to rebound and absolutely beat into the ground a team that they should in this Purdue team. And it's a good thing they did because Michigan and Penn State are also showing out right now.
Yes.
Michigan beat Indiana 52-7. Once again, completely dominant. The Wolverines look very complete this year. And then Penn State absolutely driving UMass into the turf 63-0.
Which, as they should have.
Yeah, that's just a game for UMass that you take the $1 million and you go back home because that's not really a fun time for anyone.
No, it's not.
Yeah, Big Ten teams definitely showing their power at this point in the year.
Other notable games from the Big Ten were Illinois having a walk-off field goal against Maryland to win 27-24, and Rutgers coming down from being down 18 points to Michigan State. And Michigan State obviously has gone through a lot this season with the firing of Mel Tucker. But talk to me a little bit about that team dynamic right now.
Michigan State's struggling a lot right now. It looks like there's a lot of internal turmoil with that team, so not really a great situation. And I think they're in for even a rougher week this weekend when they have to play Michigan. So
100%.
Bad time to be a Michigan State fan.
And back over to the Pac-12, we've talked a lot about them in our notable games. USC, Oregon, Washington, but also Arizona and Washington State. Arizona winning that game 44-6.
Yeah, Washington State was kind of a sleeper team to start the year. They rattled off a couple good wins. We're like, okay, maybe they can make some noise. And Arizona said, the only noise you're making is a dying whimpers. We beat you into the ground and beat them 44-6. This Arizona team kept it close with USC in LA last weekend, and now this might be a sneaky team to watch out for later in the season.
I agree. We also had UCLA and Oregon State, with Oregon State winning 36-24.
Yeah, Oregon State still a very physical team. Looks very good in the Pac-12, and if any team is going to make an upset to either Oregon or Washington, I think it'll be this Oregon State team, but I do think you're going to end up with a rematch in Vegas later this season between Oregon and Washington for the Pac-12 title.
Yep. Week 7 was a good one with a lot of shifting happening around in the top 25. And to end our college football segment, let's go right into 4 to Score, the part of our show where we draft our playoff teams and the first 2 out after the most recent weekend of college football. Micah, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So for my number 1, I have Michigan. They look like the most complete team all year, and they continue to do so with an absolute drubbing of Indiana. They just look really good, plain and simple, and so I'm curious to see who you have at number 1.
At number 1, I also have Michigan. I just think that their defense and their offense has been so dominant this season, and after a big win, they deserve the number 1 spot.
Close behind Michigan, I then have Washington in my number 2 slot. The most impressive win of the year is their win over Oregon for me right now. And so because of that, I'm going to put them in the number 2 spot. Their offense is obviously amazing, and the defense has proven that they can be good enough to win them games. And so I think that's really all I needed to see from that defense. And so because of that, I have them in number 2.
I also think Washington's performance this past week was outstanding. But at number 2, I have Georgia coming in. While not the win that we kind of hoped, or not the win margin that we kind of expected, and coming off that Auburn game a couple weeks ago too, and with the Brock Bowers injury just happening too, I do think Georgia will somehow manage to pull ahead. I do think they win the SEC and I think they're going to remain undefeated, and that'll keep them their number 2 spot.
Yeah, for me, this Georgia team is it's a bit weird. Like, last week they came out versus Kentucky, throttled Kentucky. I was like, okay, you deserve to be back at number 1. And they come out flat versus Vandy. Brock Bowers is injured. That's a huge loss for the team. And so because of that, I've bumped them down to number 3, because I think if you put them on a neutral site between Michigan or Washington right now, Michigan and Washington both beat Georgia.
Yep. At number 3, I have Washington, and not really anything else we need to say about that. We hit all the points. Very powerful team, very dominant team right now.
Then for me at number 4, I have Florida State. They've looked just very solid all year. Good wins over LSU and Clemson, and just kind of coasting through an ACC schedule right now, although they might have some challenges later in the year, but for right now, they've looked very impressive, so I have them as the last team in my top 4.
I also have Florida State as my number 4. You know, they have been coasting through this season, and I do think they win out in the ACC. Don't think they deserve to be the number 3 spot, which is why I'm keeping them at number 4, just because I think Washington has outperformed them. But yeah, those are my top 4.
Then for my first 2 out, I have Oklahoma at 5, then Ohio State at 6. I know Ohio State just committed a murder this past week, but I still don't trust Kyle McCord in a big game as much as I do even Dylan Gabriel. Now that he's proven himself versus Texas, that Texas win is probably the second most impressive win of the year for me that this Oklahoma team has. So that's why I have them at 5 and then Ohio State at 6.
I'm with you on the same top 2, or first 2 being out, but I have them flipped. I have Ohio State at 5 and Oklahoma at 6. All the same reasons you do, just flipping the spot just a little bit. We're halfway through the college football season, a very interesting season to say the least. Stay tuned, and when we come back, we'll hop into the pros where we talk about all the chaos that happened in the NFL this past week.
Welcome back to Paige and Micah in the PM. Let's move over to the NFL, where there was a very chaotic weekend that we just got through, including the 2 remaining undefeated teams losing for the first time this year. The Eagles lost to the Jets, and the 49ers lost to the Browns. In 2 very surprising outcomes, Jake Moody of the 49ers missed his first 2 field goals of the year, including a possible game winner. To make the 49ers drop one to the Browns. So very disappointing for the Niners, who we both thought were going to last the longest as an undefeated team. And to be fair, they only made it about 3 hours less than the Eagles.
Yeah, very. I was a little disappointed. I was really hoping there would be at least one team that would make it out of the NFL unscathed, undefeated. But
72 Dolphins get to pop the champagne again.
That is true, but unfortunately we won't be getting that this season. But there's always next season, of course.
Yeah. Now let's start, as we always do, with the AFC and the AFC East. As the Jets put in a good performance versus the Eagles to hand in their first loss, Zach Wilson looking serviceable, which is better than you would have expected coming into the year. And the Bills surviving the Giants in a rough game in primetime. What did you think about that one?
Very physical game, a lot of back and forth. Very similar to a lot of our college football games this past weekend, too. Tough offensive game as the Bills won 14-9. The Giants never scoring a touchdown, only getting points through field goals. When that happens, there are some issues on the offensive that need to be discussed and kind of fixed before the next week.
At least some encouraging signs from the Giants' defense, though, as you move forward. And then the Dolphins just continue to cruise as they have been, murdering the Panthers, and the Patriots are still awful.
Oh, yes, the Patriots. We talked about last episode that being our striking midnight team, and I mean, they could be our striking midnight team every week for
honestly,
their performance.
They're so bad. Over to the AFC North, the Browns with another team that knocked off an undefeated team this week as they beat the 49ers in Cleveland, and this defense is insane. Why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Yep, they had about a little bit over 1,000 yards allowed, and that is the 3rd fewest by a team for first 5 games, since 1970. It's been a long time since 1970, so that's a pretty good stat, if you ask me.
Yeah, and not only that, they're holding teams at just 200 offensive yards per game, and the next closest team is the Ravens at 260. So they're very far ahead in that category. Speaking of the Ravens, still dealing with massive injury issues, as it seems like they always are with this team.
Yeah,
receivers have bricks for hands. It's just, it's tough times to be a Baltimore Ravens fan right now. Then the Steelers. The Steelers had a bye week, but it kind of felt like they lost with every other team in the division winning. So unfortunate for them as well. And then why don't you tell us a bit about the Bengals bouncing back?
Well, the Bengals are now, sitting even 50-50, 3-3 with wins over Arizona and Seattle, which, it will make them feel very good. And I think will kind of help them go into these next couple weeks. I don't know who they have coming up.
It's a fairly easy schedule for them moving forward. But, yeah, Joe Burrow has bounced back really well. And so you love to see that. Jamar Chase with his little 7-Eleven chain always open, and he's playing like it for sure. Cool. Now down to the AFC South, where the Jacksonville Jaguars moved to 4-2 after a win over the Indianapolis Colts to keep the Jags in the first place of the AFC South. But more importantly from that game, the Colts. It seems like Anthony Richardson's going to be out for the year.
Yeah, unfortunately suffering a shoulder injury and will have to undergo surgery. And, just really not great for the Colts as he was, a promising rookie quarterback. And we talked about him in our previous episode. A lot of the quarterbacks in the AFC South, having the potential and, growing with their team. And just really unfortunate for Anthony Richardson and the Colts.
Yeah, speaking of young AFC South quarterbacks, though, C.J. Stroud is continuing to play really well as the Texans beat the Saints. The Texans are now 3-3, matching their win total from last year already.
Pretty good if you ask me.
Texans, I think, will, even if they don't make the playoffs, you got to count this year as a win for them. And then the Titans still exist, but Ryan Tannehill is injured, and the Titans might be done.
Yeah, not good for him, or for the Titans, as Tannehill is out. But just we'll have to see how the rest of their season plays out, and if, the team can recover from that and move forward from that injury.
Yeah, now over to the AFC West, where the Chiefs still retain the division lead after a close win versus the Broncos on Thursday Night Football, and just a really messy game all around.
Oh, goodness, the Broncos.
Yeah, that's pretty much all you need to say about the Broncos at this point. And then the Chargers chargered. There's no other way to say it. Just a disappointing performance versus the Cowboys. Justin Herbert really didn't look right all that game, missing easy throws. Only to Keenan Allen, though. He would hit Josh Palmer every time, but for some reason could not connect with Keenan Allen in that game. Then late in the game, some critical errors forced the Chargers to have to go for it deep in their own end to keep the game alive, and just could not make the first down as Herbert threw an interception as he was getting hit. So just a tough game for the Chargers, but a good game for the Cowboys, who are now closer to the Eagles in the NFC East. They moved to 4-2.
Pretty good.
Only one game behind the Eagles. And so you have to look at this Cowboys team and say maybe there is a chance they can mount a charge for the NFC East at this point in the year, despite how good Philly has looked.
Yep, I agree.
Now over to the NFC North, where the Lions are making some noise this year. They're the only NFL team without a loss in regulation at this point in the season after their win over the Bucs, and it looks like they'll have a pretty easy road to the division title with how much the Packers are struggling with Jordan Love.
Yep.
Then the Vikings might be having a fire sale with Kirk Cousins, so you never know what's going to happen with that. And then Justin Fields now injured for the Bears, so very tough for them.
Yeah, Justin Fields kind of underperforming too a little bit. We talked about last episode his time at the Bears and how much time he had left. But, I don't know. Does this sell it for him?
I don't know. It might be the nail in his Bears career.
Might be.
Now to the NFC South. Obviously, you had the Bucs losing to the Lions. And you think maybe this is an opportunity for the Falcons to rise up, as they say, for the Falcons and tie for the division lead. But instead, they chose to implode at home versus the Commanders.
Yeah.
Desmond Ridder does not look like the guy.
No, definitely does not.
Awful performance.
Yeah.
The Saints losing to the Texans. The Panthers remain winless. It was a rough week for the NFC South.
It's been rough for them.
Finally, to the NFC West, obviously you had the undefeated 49ers, no longer undefeated after their loss to the Browns. Then the Seahawks suffered a loss in Cincinnati to the Bengals. They could not finish in the red zone in that game. It was very odd. So just a few questions about the Seattle offense moving forward. Can they rebound? Because this is supposed to be an easy stretch of their schedule, and they're not starting it off really well. The Rams are back to 3-3, and they don't look very bad. Cooper Kupp back, I think it's really injected new life into this offense as they absolutely murdered the Cardinals.
Oh, yeah.
Cardinals had been putting up a fight all year, did not put up a fight in this one.
No, they're just bad.
Yeah.
And finally, it's that time of night. This is Striking Midnight, where we give you the team this week whose time has just run out. Micah, who do you think your team is?
I think it's going to be the Tennessee Titans for me. They were already not good with an offense coming in ranked at 26th and defense at 18th in yards allowed. Now with Ryan Tannehill going down, do you turn to Malik Willis? Do you turn to Will Levis? What do you do? It's just a bad spot for the Titans. They kind of look lost at sea right now, very listless, and so I really don't think they have anywhere to go for the rest of the season other than down and out.
Yeah, that Tannehill injury was really big for them, and I just think is going to hit them super hard. And with coming in with the offense and a defense not super strong, losing your quarterback, this might be the nail in the coffin for them. Definitely we'll have to see how the end of their season plays out, but as you said, not looking very promising at this point.
Yeah. And that closes out our night. Thanks for watching episode 2, and we'll see you next week for more football breakdown. For tonight, I'm Micah Farmer.
And I'm Paige Hunter.
And this has been Paige and Micah in the PM.
But we're doing so good. Oh my gosh.
Defending Missouri with my life.
Hey.
Hi, we're in a commercial break.
Yeah, we're at a commercial break.
Nice.
Yeah,
How long have you been sitting out here?
a minute.
I've been sliding back and forth.
Yeah, I've seen him go back and
I
forth.
went out into the hallway and Paul was talking and I was like, and I turned around.
Oh my god.
All right, we're gonna finish this out right
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah,
Yep.
have fun.
Thank you.
I'm excited to watch whenever it goes on.
Thank you. So. And finally, it's that time of night. This is Striking Midnight, where we give you the team whose week. Oh my god.
All good.
Right ahead. This is Jimmy, just like our outro. Oh, that was
went a lot
so
better for
good.
time. Yes. That's not gonna be an hour.
No.
Woohoo. All right, let me go stop recording and then we can start turning stuff off.